recording this session. So welcome to the 6th broadcast in the EVA25 series. And today, in celebration of Bonfire Night, Guy Fawkes Night, Fireworks Night, I've invited, and he's agreed to come, Martin Paver, who the more observant among you will note is sat just in front of me on my screen. I don't know whether it looks the same to you or whether you're all in the same positions on this gallery feature. Heard of Martin 4 years ago as he emerged into the space that some of us occupy, which is either characterised as being a bête noire or John the Baptist, really, as he emerges and rocks the boat a bit as a fresh idea comes into play, and some of the mad fools that we are continue pushing on with it and go through the various pain barriers that there are until they, rather like, I think there might be a Who song about it, but that you become part of the establishment, and Martin's well on the way to that journey. So if you say data analytics, most people would at least know of or have heard of Martin and his data analytics championing. So I thought, really good idea. I've supported him over the last few years to ensure that his voice was heard, and we're going to do that a bit tonight, and hopefully have an informative conversation this evening. So, hello, Martin. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Perhaps you could answer my first quizzical question. Like lots of terms that we hear, and we all say, "Oh, yeah, I know about that." What, in a nutshell, for you, would you define data analytics as being to the lay person, and what's so good about it? What's so important about it?
In terms of project data analytics, so I call project data analytics something different to data analytics. Data analytics has got quite a constrained definition, whereas project data analytics is a catch-all term which does everything from machine learning through to Power BI and automation. So basically, project management is very process focused. So we can use data analytics techniques and automation to streamline some of that and move the human being up the value chain. And that data that comes out the back of a project, which we don't tend to use because it's an exhaust plume from the back of a project, we can start to harness that and use that to start to drive insights. So a prime example, which I tend to give, is Crossrail. It's got loads of data out the back of that project, and it's very difficult to leverage that data. So we're building HS2, and we could have learned loads and loads of lessons from Crossrail, and that's not in terms of lessons learned, all that data. So we've now got the tools where we can work in that data and start to get the insights from that data, so we can make next time round a greater productivity and increased delivery confidence. So that's the overall approach to project data analytics. So as I say, it's not the data analytics term that you should be focused on, it's more about the concept of advanced data analytics in project delivery. Is that all right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, so just to clarify, because I missed a beat there, is it, so would you refer to it as project data analytics or just data analytics generally?
Project data analytics. So
that's similar, because we had the similar definition with governance. You know, you hear governance as a term bandied around, but the members of some of the associations that we have would always say, well, it's project governance, in the same way that it's project risk.
Yeah.
So we're always kind of qualifying the terminology that we use to do that. And you mentioned a term that some of us might not know, which is Power BI. You said, what's that?
So basically, Microsoft's got this thing called Power Platform, and it's got in there Power BI that is like a glorified version of Excel with lots of pie charts and various other charts where you can interact with them and drill down. And they've now got functionality in there. If a chart is changing over time, it will do sort of automatic narrative on that change. So it'll say in the last quarter, this number has gone up by 22%, which indicates something or other.
Right.
So you can now start to use artificial intelligence to give you the narration as part of your reports. So the days of just knocking up loads and loads of PowerPoint reports have now gone. So as part of that Power Platform, they've got Power Automate as well, which does a lot of the automation functions. So you can do workflows and things like that. And there's various other parts of that Power Platform as well. So Power Apps is another one where you work up an app for your phone or an app for your computer where people can go and log things. So instead of you putting it into a big spreadsheet, you put it into Power Apps, and it goes into a central data store, and you can use that data store for various means then. So you've got one source of the truth, basically.
Yeah.
So we should stop using spreadsheets and start to move towards these new technologies, basically.
Okay. So what you have developed and built quite a substantial community, I think in something called Project Meetup, is it? That happens.
It's a Project Data Analytics Meetup, yeah.
Yeah, and that happens, I think, once a month on a Wednesday. Is it? First
So
and second.
it's once a month in various parts around the UK,
Yeah.
and we've taken it to twice a month now. So it's the second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday of the month in the evening at 6:30. We've got 6,500 to 7,000 people now as part of that community. So we get about 100 people some nights. And we talk about Project Data Analytics. So the one next week, we're talking about the task force on Wednesday night next week. And it's basically sharing conversation on all this stuff. So we had Dev from Nplan come and talk a few weeks ago. I'm trying to set up Network Rail as well, courtesy of Alistair and his talk recently. So I'm following that through and trying to get Network Rail involved at the end of November as well to talk about some of the cool stuff they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So when you see in my mind, I'm wondering and be interested to know what your opinion on this is why is there such a build up of interest in project data analytics when many of us or some of us who are involved in some of the larger, more complex programs, the bigger projects, think that they're already analysing the data out of existence and creating lots of sort of forward-looking analytical, I don't know, solution-based, recommendation-oriented data anyway to drive and inform management decisions and management choice. Why is it you think that you seem to have touched a sort of nerve almost, and you know why are you getting such large turnouts?
So I think that people see that the world's changing. So in terms of project controls, I think it's going to be revolutionised in the next 3 or 4 years. So you speak to people like Breda Ryan, Sue Simonite, and those sort of people, and they really see this coming. And they're immersed in the community now, and they're starting to do some really cool stuff. So Breda's coming along to the hackathon at the weekend, for instance, giving up a weekend to come along to learn about this stuff. So I think that people see that their job is going to evolve, and if they don't evolve with it, then there's big chunks of their job will become obsolete. I also see that in terms of the governance people, so if you're a project director and you're trying to manage your project, you've probably not got the insights that you need in your project because it gets filtered as it goes up the chain. Especially if you've got these organizations with everything's filtered, it's delayed, it could be a month late in terms of the data they're getting. So what we're seeing on projects such as the A14, for instance, is real-time reporting using just Power BI dashboards. So the board report now is a Power BI pack. So no more PowerPoint engineering, it's just coming straight from the common data store and it's being visualized. And you can have role-based views as well. So if you're the finance director, you see a special view for you. If you're the project director, you'll see a special view for you. So people now start to see that they can get access to this. It's not manipulated data, it's raw data. On top of that, the risk registers and things like that will be risk based upon what people perceive at any point in time. There'll be various agendas, various bias in that data set. If conceptually you could take every single risk ever and put all that into a big data store and link it to a schedule and a cost plan and suppliers and all those other features we call them in data engineering and data science, if you can aggregate all of that, then the computer's going to be better at predicting risk than you are. The problem with that is there's some risks which are brand new, like COVID, for instance, was a few months ago, and it wouldn't be in the data set, so you wouldn't predict it because it's not in your data set. So it's got to be enhanced by human judgment. But a lot of the risks that we tend to see in the NO reports when projects have gone really bad are entirely foreseeable. Alex Budzier and Bent Fluvier published a report in 2011 talking about ICT projects, and from a sample of 1,200 projects, they said 1 in 6 is a black swan. And when you drill into those projects, it's not a black swan because it was entirely foreseeable. Just that person probably didn't have enough experience to foresee it. So with a big data set now, it starts to become a bit more foreseeable, and we can anticipate it, and we can understand our predisposition. So is there certain part of a project, if it is not likely to emerge, and what can we do about it?
Okay, so you're talking about the job evolving or the requirements evolving, and I think in there somewhere is also the opportunity, because of the way that technology has moved on as well. You know, in the old days when I was running an MRP schedule in exercise, for example, I used to switch it on a Friday and then hope it would be done by Tuesday. You know, as the machine lumbered in, so that, you know, I'd take the weekend off. But now you can do schedule analysis within seconds on huge projects and programs. You know, because the sheer computing power has increased, you know, by a huge order of magnitude. And I think also that means that the opportunities within the job, which moves project controls people from maybe struggling all month just to get the data ready so they can slap out some reports, some progress and status reports, which they don't look at, or they don't really think about very much, because they've got to rush off and get next month's data ready and prepared and rolled in. So there was much less time, if you like, available, much less free time for people to carry out the informed analysis. But because you can do all of that stuff in a portfolio view, almost, you know, huge organizational view, almost instantaneously, that ought to be freeing up acres of space. So again, I imagine that whilst so to come back to my use of the word opportunity, the opportunity was there to do all of this really smart analytical stuff, whether senior management knew it was available or not. Now that window has opened up, I'm imagining that people may have to revisit the way that they picture themselves, and the sort of roles that they define for themselves, as well as possibly introduce or reintroduce or put into play new processes for doing this. So do we need new people? Do the new people need to be different, or is it the same community just upskilling itself?
So my own view is, if you bring in a load of data scientists to do this stuff, right, they'll start to nibble away at existing jobs. So if you look at a project controls job and they'll say, right, we'll automate your reporting, we'll come in and set up your data pipelines, we will start to do all the predictions for you. What's left of that project controls job? So it starts to get to a point where that role becomes so small, it's got to be spread across various projects. If instead, and the problem is that data scientists, they don't necessarily understand the domain context, they don't understand the questions that you need to be asking, they don't understand the quality and the context of the data. So if instead we can take those project controls people or the project managers, project engineers, and to upskill them, and it's a bit like the 1960s, right? In the 1960s, we used to go to a typing pool to get the typing done. And then Bill Gates came along with a word processor, and then we could get rid of the typing pool. And it's going to be the same with this. A lot of this technology is very low code. So it's low code, plug and play type stuff. You can learn to use it. But it's integrating all this stuff together. And these features are coming out at such a rate. It's lifelong learning now. You don't just go on a degree anymore. It's lifelong learning to stay plugged into these new capabilities and to understand their benefit. And with Python code, for instance, there's libraries out there which you can just download a library, and they're all free of charge. And you can use that to go and learn something in terms of the models. So it ingests a load of data, And you can take risks, for instance, in a risk register. You'll take all the risks in a risk register. You'll say these are badly defined risks, these are well-defined risks, and it'll learn from all of that. And when you're typing in a risk, it will give you feedback about the effectiveness of your risk definition. It will say these are the risks that you would expect to see at this sort of a project, a phase of a project, or this part of the work breakdown structure, whatever. So it's white space. So that needs people coming along to solve these thousands of problems that we've got on resourcing and stakeholder management, you know, all the things we've been grappling with. It's a phenomenal opportunity because we can reinvent it. So I don't think it's reinventing it by getting some people who don't understand the project context and the project domain. I think it's taking those people and giving them the skills so they can learn to do something cool. I think that's the difference.
So how are you sort of mobilizing the idea? Because I don't see a great deal of evidence that there are many opportunities to get up to speed on analytics in the larger bodies and the associations at the moment. Do you think that you're sort of carrying that?
The problem is this doesn't sit anywhere, Steve, because it's project data analytics, right? It's not just data analytics. Data analytics would teach you to take a load of data out of Amazon, right? Petabytes of data, streaming data, and do something with it. Our data problems are very, very different. We've got messy data. You know, trying to analyze risks in risk registers is really hard, you know, because everybody uses different definitions. You might use different columns in your spreadsheets, right? It's really messy data. And data volumes aren't there as well, and data quality is not there. So we've got to start a journey to educate people on this stuff. So we started back in 2017 with the first meetup, and that's now grown to 6,500 people. So that's educating people on the first step of the journey. And then the second step of the journey was working with Sir Robert McAlpine. We set up the hackathon, so Project Hack. And the 7th one is this weekend, and that brings together.
Do you want to say what a hackathon is?
So basically, there's various types of sort of hackathon. The word is sort of loosely applied, and in terms of a geeky hackathon, you'd bring together a lot of technical ninjas, and they'd go and develop some code over a weekend, and they'd solve a top-end problem by coming up with an MVP. So a prototype solution, right? At the bottom end of it, I've seen that there's some project management organizations recently have been holding hackathons, which is just a load of people come together and they talk about something and they try and create a solution off the back of it. And that's not necessarily a technical solution. It might just be a new process or a new policy or something like that. Where we're focused on is a mixture of those two. So basically, we bring a load of technical experts together, and that's about a quarter. And then there's some general domain experts, and there's about half of them are project managers. And we try and give the project managers the skills so they can start to solve their own problems. And in terms of last hackathon, for instance, we had data from Baker Hughes, and it was 96,000 activities from a load of projects. We took all that data and said, what's the difference between the estimates in terms of the work breakdown structure and the final outturn? And can we go back and now start to give a real-time feedback loop back to those estimates? And they've not been able to do that before because it's a monster job that's going to take about a year. So a team got together, 6 people got together, and they solved that in a weekend. So they used machine learning to feedback on those estimates, and they can tell you with a confidence band what the accuracy of each of those estimates is, and go back and keep sort of updating it. And secondly, in terms of all the weight breakdown structures, departments, department codes, all that sort of stuff, they can say that these departments are more predisposed to variance than these departments. So these departments, you estimate 5 days, it lands at 5 days. This other sort of department, we're estimating 30 days, and it's anywhere between 40 days and 90 days. And we don't understand why, so you can then drill into it. So they did that in 2 days, which was pretty phenomenal, really. So the chap who was leading that, a chap called Pedro, works with Baker Hughes, and he's on this apprenticeship scheme that we run. So an apprenticeship scheme, in my day, you know, a load of my mates went on to an apprenticeship working with international harvesters up in Doncaster, and they'll be on the lathes and that sort of stuff, being an electrician. The apprenticeships have changed now. So what government did a few years ago was they started to tax every company with a pay bill of more than £3 million. And there's a tax on there of 0.5%. And that 0.5% goes into a pot, which is that company's account, and they can only spend it on training, on apprenticeship training. So it's got to be an approved provider, and it takes you up to 12 months to get approved. So it's a way of upskilling people, and it doesn't need to be youngsters, it doesn't need to be new employees. It's a way of upskilling anybody in the organisation with what they call substantial new skills. So if you're going to learn something new, then you can draw down on that levy, and it's basically free training because it's a tax that you've already paid. And I've spoken to some organisations like the Environment Agency, and they only spend 23% of their levy. So a lot of this money is not getting spent at the moment because people don't know how to spend it, etc. I spoke to Petrifac recently, and they're interested in this apprenticeship, and they found out through Petrifac is they're not even registered in England for the apprenticeship scheme. So they're paying this tax and they're not drawing down on it in England. So there's spending some stuff up in Scotland, but they didn't realise it's all separate. And this is a big organisation, so it's quite complicated with the rules. But once you understand the rules, they just draw down on that levy and get some free training, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, look, can I just take you back to your hackathon really what its intended purpose was to do, which is presumably to analyse data in such a way that some kind of conclusion can be drawn, that can be used for better informed business.
So we do 2 or 3 things, right? The biggest thing for me is upskilling people and just showing people the light and showing them what we did over the weekend, right?
Right. So so translate that into a working context. And you're in an organisation, you're in the PMO of a particularly large organisation perhaps, and you're doing this data analytics stuff. Where are the main points of impact, the major benefits that come out of this that can be translated into recommendations, you know, for improvements in practice or predictability? And where would you place those within an organisation?
So it's a mixed bag, really, right? So we've got a challenge from Petrifac this weekend, which is saying, if you go into the settings in Teams, right, you can get a transcript of this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a transcript of the meeting, you can then analyse that. You can extract the actions from the transcript. You put those into an automation system, and the automation system will then say, Steve, you got an action. It was due to be completed a week ago. I can then run a dashboard on my entire team with all their actions and see which people are closing their actions down and which ones aren't. Mm-hmm. We should be able to do that through automation. So that's a challenge we're setting this weekend. Now, if we do that, we'll open source it. Every company then can use that, which saves you writing notes on meetings, right? So all that stuff I used to do as a lad, it used to take me days after big meetings. You don't need to do it anymore, potentially, you know, if we solve it this weekend. And that's just one example. There's another one, which is things like health and safety challenges. So we're saying with health and safety, we've got loads of data coming out of health and safety. Can we use that data to understand which parts of a project are more predisposed to health and safety issues? So that's another challenge which Petrifac's setting. And Baker Hughes are back again with a slightly different data set, but very similar challenge again, is to look at their schedule, and some parts of the schedule have got a task that says, I would assume it's one task, and once you get to this milestone, we'll assume it's 30% complete. Once you get to this milestone, we'll assume it's 70% complete, right? That's never been validated. It's just a load of assumptions. So they now want to take it back and to use the data to validate that assumption and see if that burn down chart is appropriate for those milestones.
Okay, so I'm interested in how do you translate this into a language that senior management or, you know, are these the sorts of conclusions and recommendations that can be translated to senior management so that they can see the benefit of them? and then and then be the the good sponsor stakeholder that reinforces it. There's nothing better than telling a politician that you've got the answer to the universe, and then allowing them to take control of it, and take credit for its implementation. So have you got that kind of virtuous circle at play? And are you helping people when they're doing, who chooses what data to analyze, and what lens are they putting on when they're looking at the data, for example? It strikes me that it might be useful to have a kind of crib list of all the things that an organization can do to check that its data is up to speed, almost, to make sure it's in good shape. Is that sort of thinking around?
So what we've done with the task force, so we've launched a UK project data analytics task force that's got BA Systems in it. It's got Sir Robert McAlpine, Petrofac, Heathrow Airport, UCL, Oxford University, and various other people. So 12 of us have come together. We've written this white paper. So go to pdataskforce.com, resources section, and there's a white paper in there. So if you read that white paper, it says in there, this is what the vision is to improve project delivery performance by an order of magnitude. Now that's the thing that starts to grab people's attention, is a 10 times improvement over Oxford University's baseline data set. Now, companies like Network Rail are working with NPlan to look at using their data on schedules to predict if the schedule is going to go over, basically, and to start to predict variance. Now, that's not a risk assessment, that's anticipating variance. It hasn't got causality in it because you haven't linked it back to the thing that triggered it. So it's only when you start to connect these data sets together is we start to get causality. And that's missing at the moment. That's a few years away for some organizations, but we'll start to get there by working together. So some of these organizations are going out and buying some capabilities, some tools, but that's only such a small part of this overall enterprise, because what we're trying to do is to stop project delivery professionals being process monkeys and tool jockeys, and to move them up the value chain. So you move them up the value chain and they start to get better at predicting where things are going to go wrong, understand predisposition to variance, understand where your risk and contingency spend is best invested. It's almost limitless in terms of what we can do. And I've been a project manager for the last 30 years. I've ran $1 billion job in Aldermaston, and I've worked on some massive portfolios as well. I ran a multi-billion portfolio, and I see this opportunity at the moment in project data analytics bigger than anything I've ever seen in my career. Once you start to get your head around it, it is hugely transformational. And it's really positive as well. For us, it's really positive because it means we don't have to do that grunt anymore. And we can do all the really clever stuff where we start to save a load of money.
Okay, well, let's just go back. You said there are about 12 members to this task force that you said has been set up. Are they governed by some agreement to share information or to collaborate in some way? And what is it? What's the end game? Are they aiming to produce some kind of guidance on it, or will they be putting the data into a huge pool that they can, I don't know, get sector-oriented metrics out of? What's the purpose of it, and how does that work?
So in terms of the task force, it's got 6 work streams. So there's an engagement work stream trying to sort of pull people in, see what they want from it. There's a research work stream as well, because at the moment this research is driven by universities. It's not driven by industry and demand pull. So we're trying to change that. So there's a research work stream. There is a data access work stream, and that's led by Sir Robert McAlpine and Heathrow Airport. And they're saying, let's start to work together now to open up some of this data. And it's very sensitive data, this, so you can't open source it. So there's a big difference between open source data and open data. So open data is a loose term, so you can use it where you can start to open up this data, and it might be aggregated, it might be anonymized, pseudonymized data. You can use federated learning techniques. You can do different things where you can plug into this data set, and you can bring the algorithm to the data so it learns from the data and goes away. Nobody else sees the raw data apart from the algorithm. So there's ways of doing that start to emerge at the moment. So if we can do that through a concept of a data trust, then it means we've got a trustworthy way of pooling this data for the collective benefit. And we've set one of those up with Sir Robert McAlpine, Mace, Keir and various other organisations in construction, and we're hoping to start to tackle the productivity challenge, because if we can start to pool cost data and it's independently stewarded, then we start to go somewhere. Ties have got another system that they're working up with Costain, but that's more of an anonymised data set which sits somewhere centrally that starts to plug together lots of government data.
What's TIES, Martin?
It's the Transport Infrastructure Efficiency Strategy, right?
And that's a government body, is it?
It's a government body. It's part of a DFT, and they link it with rail something or other as well. I can't remember the organisation. So basically, the problem with that is if you've got a main contractor pulling together a lot of other people's data, those other people who's putting their data in are going to be skeptical about it. So it then starts to destroy trust. And right from day one, we're potentially setting off on the wrong journey.
So by skeptical, you mean what? They believe that they're commercial, there's some sort of commercial issue there?
Well, basically, if you're a main contractor and you've got to give your data to another main contractor, then what is that main contractor going to do with it? So what you do, you'd aggregate it, you'd anonymize it, you redact certain things, you add noise to it. So it then drives bad behaviors. If you can independently steward the data in a data trust, and you're responsible for your data in that data trust, and you set the rules of it, then if you're not happy with it, you can pull your data out. And I think where government's going at the moment, it's saying, I'm starting to see all this data is quite useful. I'm going to start to contract for this data and to insist on it. And if you go and insist too much and you start to get into commercial data, companies will then start to cry foul because they'll say, that's my IP and my data. So it's sending you on a journey into confrontation and to litigation, because it's one contractor looking after another contractor's data. It needs to be a trustworthy environment where you're confident that you can actually pull this data for the greater good, and it's got the appropriate controls on it. And you can only do that with a membership model. So the trust is governed and owned by its members. It's not a government thing. It's not a Costain or somebody else's thing. It's got to be jointly owned. Everybody's got an investment in it and saying, if I'm not happy with what my data is being used for, I'm going to stop you using my data for that purpose. So it's the number one thing is trustworthiness. And it's something we've been working up with the Open Data Institute. So the Open Data Institute was founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt. And this is their principle, is you can only get to open data if you've got trust. And if you've not got trust, you'll never get there, and you'll delude yourself that you're getting there because you think you're getting lots of data, but it'll get manipulated on the way in. So we need to try and prevent that. And what machine learning needs is as much raw data as it can see. And if we aggregate things, anonymize and mess the data up, we won't be able to do all this clever stuff through machine learning because we're messing about with the data at source. So we're setting ourselves up for a very inefficient journey when we could be setting ourselves for a really productive journey, because everybody's pooling data in the greater interest, subject to agreed rules, which everybody signs up to.
So who do you think should set up a national or govern and manage? I know you say it's a members organisation, but should it be an entirely independent organisation, or should it be? Do you think it should be a government body, or maybe affiliated with standards bodies?
If it's a government body, it's not independent, right? And I spent 20 years in government, and I saw some of my colleagues, when I was in government, using data to go and beat contractors up with and say, you've not been open with this. I can see you're going to be late. I'm going to do something with this. So it needs some really sort of mature behaviours. And once you do that once again, you destroy trust. So I think, and you can't have one data trust that does everything because your board will be too big, right? Your members will be too many. So what we need to do is to have this sort of fractal arrangement where you've got lots of these trusts all joined together, independently governed with a common set of rules. And we need to pull in things like federated learning and some of the technical aspects of it. So I think it's just a load of us coming together to make these things happen, but it needs to be independently stewarded, is to make sure that these contractors aren't working in a competitive situation and one contractor is seeing another contractor's data, and they shouldn't be. It needs to be independently stewarded, so there's a load of rules about who can see what in what context.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm going to throw this, because we're running out of time at the moment, but I'm going to throw this open to the attendees to ask questions if they want to of you. It sounds to me as though this particular discussion is where we've ended up at is probably one of the key factors in going forward with this as a, let's say, an undertaking that's for the good of the community, you know, whether that's society or the world at large. And if that solution, if a solution isn't found, there'll be factionalism of some sort. And yes, a particular organisation will be able to mine its own data very, very successfully. But it sounds to me that there are, you know, synergistic benefits by pooling and sharing, if at all possible. And the $64,000 question is it worth the candle? You know, to get there, to do that, are the benefits foreseeable to get there? So, has anybody got any questions to ask of Martin?
Look at it. Bob's got his hand up. Go for it, Bob.
Oh, is he? Go on, Bob. By all means, put your camera on. Have you got one on, Bob? And a microphone, maybe.
Well done. Good spot. Martin, very good. Do you have a list of relevant professional disciplines that are actually providing the data? I mean, in a project, in my last company, in my analysis, we had 15 disciplines to build a skyscraper. But are you tracking them by discipline?
So this is early days, Bob, on this journey, right? It's early days. Even this data trust, we're looking at productivity data. We're still scoping out now what are the factors that contribute to productivity, and there's no agreement on that, right? Everybody's got different views, metrics, right? So all of that needs to be worked through, and we need to work through. So what data will we pool so we can work collectively to drive up productivity and to get the insights out of it? So the first step on the journey is to get all the questions together that we want to answer associated with productivity. So we can talk about velocity, we can talk about quality, all those sort of things. And then we can get the measures and the data that starts to underpin it and where that data comes from. And then you need to reflect the data back based upon roles. So we talk to user stories. So as a project manager, I need to see this data. As a quality manager, I need to see it slightly differently. So we then do it through user stories, role-based. And most importantly, Bob, is to look at the gap analysis. And this is where we're struggling at the moment, I think, as a community, is we want to do all this stuff, but the data is not good enough to do it. So we need to cycle back around really, really quickly. And this is where advanced data analytics can help through apps and through proxies and things like that, where the data volumes start to go up and we get the data from the systems so we can then answer that gap analysis so we can answer more questions. And it's a really fulfilling job because it's a sexy job forecasting what's going to happen next, you know.
One of the reasons I asked the question is because in my experience, out of 15 disciplines, the project manager was probably reasonably expert in about 3 of them.
Yeah.
And he'd hope the other 12 would go away or they'd look after themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas as Steve knows, I keep going on about it, but my main hypothesis on all of this really is that if the managers, the people at the top, knew what they wanted to see, one, it would improve their own competence, because at the moment they're running jobs and they're not competent in all of the disciplines that run in the project, if you see what I mean. But also all of these the data would be supplied because it is demanded, rather than actually generated out of the enthusiasm of people that like making data.
Yeah. So I think that you've got to be a little bit careful with that, Bob, because I'm seeing in Petrofac, for instance, and I saw it in Baker Hughes as well, is they've got a data overload. So the person sat at the top now can see lots of data, and they're seeing thousands of dashboards, and it's like being in Sizewell and you've got every single panel flashing at you, right? You don't know what to do because you don't know what the alarms mean. So what we need is a conditional based alarms. So where you are in a project, if something's out of tolerance because of that phase of a project, that's when it needs to be flagging up to you. Just because you're in the start of a project and decommissioning plan's not finished, it probably doesn't matter, right? So it all needs to be conditional. So we need to get smart about some of this data. We're not at the moment. It's just a proliferation of dashboards. And there's some companies just starting on this journey, and some's been doing it for like 4 or 5 years. And the one who's been doing it 4 or 5 years are backing away from dashboards now and starting to be a bit more intelligent about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another question, or I shall pile in myself with one. Okay, Martin, a question really, or a challenge to go to the audience, which is, if there's one thing that you'd like them to do tomorrow, what is it in terms of promoting and moving this forward, both in terms of well, dare I say, both in terms of either stopping disabling it or enabling it in some way? What are the things that you think will move this forward?
So I think in Game of Thrones parlance, winter's coming. This is approaching at speed, and I don't think it's just another tool, Steve. Right? I think it's something very, very different. And I think what people need to do is just go into it with an open mind, an inquiring mind, and say, what is this going to do for my organisation? What's it going to do for my team? And I know that some organisations now see this as a blockbuster moment for some of their teams. If they don't make the right decision now, some of those guys could be out of work in a few years' time. And I think it's about pivoting now and starting to upskill the team so they get ready for this. And if they do that, it's a really exciting career, and it's a career that's going to last for 20 years. Whereas some of these jobs, like QSs and document controllers, those sort of jobs are sort of really going to get hammered by this technology. Yeah. But the QS's job could be a lot better job, because they get a lot more insights out of the data. Your project manager's job's going to get a lot better. Project control's job's going to get a lot better. But you need to engage with it. It's not just bolting on a tool. You need to understand and go in with a vision for what this is going to do for you. So inquiring mind, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think could be, should be, or is being done to aid people in basically getting their head around what it is? Is there a textbook? Should there be a standard? Are there qualifications that, because at the moment, which presumably has got some kind of underlying curriculum associated with it? I mean, is there something in view for that vital tranche of the organisation, the senior managers as well, so that they can bring a corporate perspective, if you like, to the deployment of it, and as you said, maybe not get bombarded by data, but know almost immediately what a startup good target dashboard might look like, and then make sure that the conditions, or allow for the conditions to prevail, where that dashboard can be populated with data that they know is assured, and above all that they can believe in. Because we haven't really touched upon data quality very much, but as they say in computing, rubbish in, you get rubbish out. Data quality major a priority to make this work. But is there anything being formally approached or considered in this area?
Task force, Steve. So There's a skills work stream which is led by BA Systems, and they're looking exactly at this, right? So what are the skills we need for future project professionals, and that's commercial people, finance people, you know, the full gambit. So they're looking into that. So please join that work stream if you want to get involved in that. We've got a data quality work stream that's looking at ontologies and make sure you can get everything joined together. The quality of data going in, make sure it answers the use case. And the solutions development work stream that I'm on is trying to democratize all of these products so we can give them all away. Because if we do it in a weekend, it's not worth anything, right? It's not worth like £20 a month software license. So we'll give it away. Everybody can then go and adapt it for their own environments, and we all move quicker together.
Yeah. Okay. Do you does the white paper contain any kind of notion of what the way forward is? You know, how you see what the ultimate sort of vision and
got the vision in there. It's got the work streams in there. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a few hands up as well, Steve.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing them. Maybe they're further down my screen at the moment. Who have we got? I want me to pick one.
Dawn, go for it, Dawn.
Dawn, go on.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed you.
No, that's okay, because I was probably the last one to put my hand up. So,
Okay.
I'll ask the question. How does your project analytic apprenticeship link to or differ completely from the information manager apprenticeship that is also now available?
So the information manager, so that's about document controls type stuff, right?
Not really.
Well,
so
right.
it might be a controversial question, but
okay, I'm not an expert on information management, so I shan't go there. But in terms of the data analytics stuff, I've had knowledge managers work with me in the past, and they've said that the information management part of it is more associated with putting things in the right place and being able to extract those documents when you need them and managing information, right? I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they told me. In terms of data analytics, it's taking all of this data that's coming out of your risk registers, schedules, logistics, technical queries, compensation events, all of that, and trying to get some insight from it. And at the same time, looking at your processes and working out which of those processes you can automate. So if we can automate the processes, we save effort, and we can redeploy that effort then up the value chain and start to get the insights that we need. Is that all right?
Yeah, that gives me a little bit more of an understanding. Yep, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. And we'll take one more, and then we'll have to bring it to a close. Alan Glasgow, you got a hand up. Are you around? Hello, Alan.
Mute.
You're on mute, I think.
Still on mute.
My apologies.
Hello.
This time here. Thanks very much, Martin. Some really interesting stuff there. Just bearing in mind the cost and schedule impact of the effectiveness of the people with the spanners in their hands, whose ability to
Gone. Oh, have you terminated him?
No, he's. I think he's disappeared, perhaps.
Bob's got his hand up.
Oh, is he? Well, I think that was from before, Bob, was it? Or are you still? You got another question? And Dawn, you maybe need to set your hand down.
No, I don't have a second question. No.
Okay, all right. Well, if Alan joins us again, we'll let him back on. But I think now is the time for poetic precision.
It is, Steve. It is. I do have a question, but it wasn't as highbrow as the other questions just before. Martin, are you from Preston?
Doncaster originally.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. I was placing you somewhere like that. That's all. That's okay.
Oh, yes.
Neither here nor there. Dead ringer for a Preston accent there. That's all. So look, here's a poem about what we have been hearing, and Martin has been regaling us with. It's about data analytics. It's called Data Analytics, and I've made it connected with the special day that today is. And I know everyone's realised it's bonfire night tonight. So the night that we celebrate Guy Fawkes, the only man to enter Parliament with honest intentions. So here's the poem. Let's move the human up the value scale. Project data analytics is the way to prevail. Like John the Baptist let loose in Atlantis, project data analytics is the task force that wins the race like a dark horse. Talking shady animals, what about the black swan? Well, data analytics doesn't drop the baton. The world is changing. The challenges are rearranging. Jobs are going to evolve. Yesterday's solutions have stalled. New unpredictables like COVID will be hard to solve. Everything might be delayed. Driving up productivity will always be center stage. Real-time reporting, raw data. Read now, not later. Take every single risk ever. The problems we all grapple with, multiple solutions to put through the data sieve, defining the risk, stick or twist. Enter the hackathon, loosely applied, technical ninjas at the top end, project managers below, solutions off the back of it that restart the show. Cleaning up the messy data, giving your order to a get things done waiting. What data? What lens to look through, applying a vision that magnifies what you need to do. Let's start to work together to open up the data. Remember, the 5th of November, data trustworthiness, reason, and good to trot.
Very good.
Well done. Good time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I'm from Goole originally, so yeah.
Oh, you're a ghoulie.
Yeah, I'm a Goole.
Alan Glasgow, if you're there, you've got a chance to ask that question if you come back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thanks, Paul.
Conked out there. Sorry, I was going to say, Martin, thanks very much. But bearing in mind the cost and schedule impact of the effectiveness of the people with the spanners in their hands, and it's their ability to perform that impacts a lot of major infrastructure projects. Are we putting enough effort, do you think, into managing the data that helps those people as opposed to the so-called project delivery professionals?
So there's some cool stuff out there. So there's a chap in Australia called Kelvin McGrath who's doing some really cool stuff about team performance and making sure that you can understand if people have got what they need when they need it, and making sure. So it's like things like and on apps as well. So if you're stuck on a construction site and you can't do something because somebody's not giving you something, if you can log that, then it starts to go into your productivity metrics and you can start to fix it later. So it is going to be very much driven by the people on the ground whose input into these apps, which drive up the data, so you can have some conversations about fixing it. At the moment, you can't justify the investment through the management team because you don't have the data to invest in the improvement. So this will start to drive all these micro investments everywhere, saying, let's go and get an app to do that. That's going to take 3 days to develop it. So you'll see a lot of these micro improvements coming, and they'll just proliferate, and you'll have loads of these capabilities coming up. So yeah, it's really exciting, I think, and it needs to be driven from the bottom.
Okay. Thanks, Alan.
Innovation at the edge.
Right, we'll move into a few bits and pieces now. Martin, I will be circulating the video recording of this performance tomorrow, probably, and I've got a couple of bits and pieces to accompany that. So the white paper will be, or a link to the white paper, some stuff about the Project Data Analytics Academy. Is that something? And a flyer, and also an invitation or some information about the hackathons that you're running.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah. I think personally, this idea of how do you bring together a bunch of people to discuss how you can get these sectors working together has got to be a step forward. So somehow or other, maybe some of the people sat in on this meeting can help inform that. And also, I note, perhaps you'd like to give a plug for you're about to start something called Project Plugged In.
Yes.
In a couple of weeks' time. What's that all about?
So Project Plugged In is the third Wednesday in the month at lunchtime, right? So basically the evening events are educational. It's to try and get the conversation going and to bring people on and tell us what they've been up to and what they've been doing. These Project Plugged In events is these people who's coming out with some cool tech. So it's talk to vendors and we get guest speakers along. So we've got Andy Murray for the first one from the Major Projects Association, and he's going to give a 15-minute talk about project data analytics. And we've got some other vendors coming along to talk about some emerging capabilities, which is pretty cool. So and it's going to be emceed as well by the exceptional Steve Waite, no less. He's frozen.
Yeah. Well, I'm here now. Yeah. Yeah. I froze in terror, probably, so that people could shoot me. Okay. Well, that's great. So thank you very much, Martin. Interesting, entertaining, and we shall undoubtedly follow up this because this one's going to run and run. And I think, again, we need to make sure that all of these ideas get folded into the identity of project controls, the project controls community, as broadly and deeply as possible. Okay. Right. Just a couple of other announcements. A couple of weeks ago, I asked whether anybody, I shared and circulated Zoe Madams from Mace's diagram that she'd worked on within the Conversation Club, depicting the project controls community and landscape. And I've had some input from a couple of volunteers, Steve Jones from Sellafield and Alastair Forbes in particular. And I've also done some work in that area too. I will be issuing these diagrams because they're hopefully going to figure in the new forthcoming project control standard. And I will look for embellishment and comment and contributions to those two diagrams. Again, they'll probably be shunted out tomorrow with the rest of the mailing. So please look forward to that and contribute and collaborate and participate. Does anybody else have any announcements or statements they wish to make to the assembled multitude before I wish you all goodbye? Do tell me if a hand's up, because sorry, Paul, go on.
Light your fireworks at arm's length.
Hold your fireworks at arm's length.
Light them at arm's length with safety matches.
Yeah, and not in front of the face of the person that's at the other end of the arm either. I know. Okay, well, I still don't think we've decided who to throw onto the Guy Fawkes bonfire in Lewes tonight, whether it's Donald Trump or Mr. Biden. So we may have to wait till next year, or whether there's another bonfire opportunity. Well, Diwali's coming up, so they have lots of fireworks too, so maybe we can do that there. So again, thanks again to Martin. Thanks to Paul for your sterling contribution again. What are you going to call that, Paul? Has it got a title?
It's called Data Analytics, aka Cool Tech.
Oh wow, yeah, cool tech. Right, okay. So on that note, I wish everybody a safe, because undoubtedly there will be, unless you've got indoor fireworks, time on bonfire night, and see you next week when we have Lisa Morrison, who will be talking, I think, about emotional intelligence that you know, some of us might benefit from, me in particular. And so she'll look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye, and have a good week.
Yeah, cheers all. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Martin. Bye-bye.
Oh, Mark.